So, I don't know if what I'm going to say is going to match up with what's up there, because I can't see it. So just kind of bear with me. And all this happened in the last several hours. But, you know, I'd like to thank Just Transition for doing this hard work of bringing us together to make us not only think about what a just transition off of big oil looks like, but what just transition looks like without fish, you know, without, you know, our way of life on the ocean. And so, you know, I'm going to get into this in a little bit, and I guess I can see that green in the back, so that kind of helps. Maybe that's why they're jumping up and down. So this is the original native lands map of the different tribes in the state of Alaska, certainly before the land claims and before territory days and statehood. And here's the thing about you know, our region in Alaska in general is, you know, the Spaniards came in the 1700s and named after them everything after themselves. Then the 1800s, the Russians came in. By the 1900s, the Americans came in, and we have always been a natural resource extraction state and territory. And so, you know, when I think about the original native inhabitants of different places in Alaska, I also, you know, I think back of the land claims and what happened to our Eyak people. My mother was the matriarch in our family. The Eyaks are matriarchal, and so you are who your grandmother is. And so when the land claims was happening, my mother gathered 37 or so Eyaks that lived in the region, and if you had 25 or more Native people in your ancestral village, you were entitled to a minimum of 69,120 acres of land. Well, some of the other tribes that were left out of the land claims came to my mother and said, well, Rosie, you know, if you would recognize us and allow us to be members of the village traditional council, then we'll not be left out of the land claims. And they promised my mother, but we'll make sure that the Eyak people get their land. Well, here we are 50 years later, and the Eyaks still don't have one single acre of land to call our own. And neither the village that bears our name, Eyak Village, or the Chugach Alaska Corporation, our regional, has given any of the land back to the people. And the reason that land back is important is because you need to be able to live from the land and the sea and figure out how you're going to make it during these climate changing times. It's not going to happen if we're not active stakeholders and participants and the ones who are driving and leading the change that we need to see happen in our respective regions. And before I forget, I'm from the Eagle Clan, and my Eyak name is Jamunski, which means little bird that screams really loud and won't shut up. And I received that name shortly after the Exxon Valdez oil spill because I wouldn't shut up, because I couldn't. You know, we had to do everything we possibly could to figure out how we're going to take on the biggest, baddest corporation on the planet. So I had to figure out how to be louder than everything else, yet remain a voice of reason so people would listen. So, Angela, you're going to have to tell me when to shut up, so give me like a 5-minute notice if you can. So, some of the maps, like this one, there's several places around Alaska that are just, you know, it doesn't get any better than this. And, you know, our subsistence lifestyle in Alaska is comparable to none. You know, when I travel to reservations in America and around the world, and I see that that they don't have a subsistence lifestyle, it only makes me want to fight harder for our land and our rights and our subsistence way of life, and to help not only enjoy that and practice it, but figure out how we're going to grow things from the land and the sea. And so one of these maps is the Bering River coal topographical map, which shows where the buried coal fields are, and it's in this cross-hatching. And in the larger area, I'll get into that in a moment in our land back program, but this is where we saved 62,000 acres of this controversial coal field in 2016. In the crosshatches on the lower left in that crosshatching images, two parcels of property that total 11,900 acres that's owned by a company called the Korean Alaska Development Corporation. And we're in the process of purchasing those lands right now. And we're probably gonna have to just take them. And what we're hoping is that we can come to some sort of an agreement with the coal owner, because the last thing we want to see happen on the Copper River Delta is a road across the delta and then strip mining of this coal field and slurry lines built across the delta, especially in an area where we have some of the last glaciers still thriving on the planet. The next image is an image of Prince William Sound and the Copper River Delta. It's a satellite map, and it shows you where the coal field is on the right of the delta, 55 miles east of Cordova. And this is two sister watersheds that are some of the most amazing watersheds on the planet that have 27 different runs of salmon. It has 5 different species, but all these different runs. I grew up fishing salmon and herring. We were the razor clam capital of the world. We had all the crustaceans: king crab, red crab, the golden crab. We had the tanner, the snow crab. We had the Dungeness. We had the spotted shrimp. We had it all. And I remember growing up as a fishing family, one of the last native fishing families in the region, and we'd come downstairs after a long day of work, and Mom would have dinner cooking, and we'd go, "Oh my God, seafoods again?" And we didn't realize that that was like an amazing way of life, but to us, well, we caught that, we're feeding our people, and it wasn't only until my father started bringing steaks home and from the store, and he was a tenderman, and so he would have T-bones and round steaks and prime rib and all this different stuff, and he'd give it to us 7 little Indians, and we're like, "What is this?" It was terrible. It didn't taste like venison, it didn't taste like moose or deer, and it certainly didn't taste like any of our seafoods. And he was really upset that we didn't like it, but we knew that what we harvested from the land and the sea was really special. 3 things happened to us in our region of Prince William Sound. 1959, I was born in 1959, but in 1964 we had the Good Friday earthquake. And this rocked our world, it rocked our fisheries. It was a 9.2, and it wiped out a lot of our fisheries, and it took like 25 years for the fisheries to start recovering, because the Copper River Delta rose 16 feet, and areas of Prince William Sound sunk. And so a lot of things changed for us. Then on the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday earthquake, we had the Exxon Valdez oil spill happen in our backyard. And that Exxon spill covered 1,500 miles of our pristine coastline in the Gulf of Alaska and impacted about a dozen villages. And like I said, there's areas that are still have not recovered from the oil spill. You can dig down 3 inches to 3 feet and it's crude oil. There's areas that were robust with fishery and life and different herring species that are no longer alive. Our herring run alone was 200,000 tons of herring returned into Prince William Sound annually. And in the last few years, it dropped down to 4,000 ton returning. The last 2 years, they've been spawning in different places in the Sound and the Delta, but upwards of about 20,000 ton have returned in the last 2 years, but not enough to warrant a commercial fishery. And just so you know, that was half of our fishing income when there were herring running. And the thing about it is if the herring recover, then the 27 most heavily impacted species from the oil spill would also recover. Because a herring, like hooligan, are about yay long, and they're little torpedoes of energy. They're just solid oil, so everything that eats them are gonna make it. They're gonna be okay. And then that next image is of the $1 Million Bridge, and one of the spans on the northern end had fallen down, and the Forest Service rebuilt it, and they raised that span, and now it's the $23 million bridge. And then the Mile 36 bridge eroded, and so now you can't even get there. So I thought it was interesting that, you know, they put millions and millions of dollars into this place, and it is one of the wonders of the world. And so, you know, if they ever rebuild that 36-mile bridge, all of you have got to come down and be able to drive out there, because it really is absolutely stunning. Me and our Eyak Preservation Council and Native Conservancy folks have done 70 trips down the Copper River. And I can tell you, now I can understand why the Eyaks were blissed out every single day seeing that habitat. Then, 25 years later, after the Exxon Valdez oil spill, now we're dealing with climate change. And climate change is impacting Alaska like no other place, because Alaska was colder than most places, and so it's melting faster than most places. So our glaciers, our sea ice, our permafrost is melting at unprecedented rates. That's impacting all of our fisheries and our way of life again. And the good news in the first two things that happened with the 64 quake and the 89 spill, our region and the people were resilient and could recover. I'm hoping and praying for that now, that we are resilient, because like even this glacier picture of Sheridan Glacier, it's down Sheridan Lake. You have to actually take one of those little boats about half a mile to a mile to get onto the glacier. Just happened in the last couple of years. And so the next image is of the fish underwater. And this is some of the Eyak bluebacks on the Eyak Lake. And here's the thing, in the last 5 years, we have had crazy fishery collapses. 5 years ago, we only had 44,000 sockeyes come back to the Delta. Then we had, the next year, 85,000. The following year, there was only, the ocean heated up to 76 degrees for 3 weeks down to 20 feet below the surface. And the following year, 500,000 came home. This year, they've had 2 openers, and I had Highlanders calling me and telling me they're catching 1 to 2 to 3 fish. A big set is 15. Maybe once in a while they'll catch 30. So things are changing quickly as we know it. So we started a food security program to work with our Native people to harvest subsistence foods to feed our elders during this time of COVID and hardship and the time of less. We've also decided to start figuring out how we can grow kelp and mariculture farms in the ocean, so we can figure out how to feed our people. And indigenous peoples across the state are interested in getting into this kelp space for 3 reasons, and in this order. 1, they want to be able to help restore the ocean. Number 2, they want to grow a traditional food source that they've been enjoying for thousands of years. And 3, they want to build a regenerative economy that not only they can be a part of, but they can be proud of. And so I really feel that, you know, who kelps and who farms really does matter. Because for those reasons, in that order, is why indigenous peoples want to get in. And there's kelp farms sprouting up all around America and around the world, and it's really only about making money. It's not really about sustainability or building resiliency for the future. And so we're working with some of our youth here in this picture here, and my exit strategy is the youth rising. And so for me, you know, I'm proud to teach them how to, you know, get on the water, fish, and make a living. And our layback program, I'll go through this fairly quickly. This is the Bering River Coalfield Watershed Conservation Program that we're working on right now. And just to give you an idea, what we've had to go through in the last 30 years just to try and get this coalfield preserved, is we started nearly, I want to say there's been at least 35 major environmental battles that we've had to take on. And we've won over 95% of those because everybody lost their wisdom after the Exxon Valdez oil spill. We stopped the Copper River Trail that Governor Tony Knowles wanted to build down the Copper River. What he doesn't realize is that, probably even to this day, is a world-class trail already exists, and it's called the Copper River. We stopped a 30-mile road across the Copper River Delta. We stopped oil and gas drilling in Catella and offshore in Controller Bay. We've been fighting to stop the military from bombing the Gulf of Alaska every spring during fishing season. We saved 62,000 acres of the coalfield already. We've extended, in the last couple of years, we extended the Eyak, the Exxon restoration boundary all the way down to Cape Suckley to include the Copper River Delta for the first time in 30 years. So the Exxon Valdez Oil Spill Trustee Council is actually having to do ecosystem restoration rather than political restoration. And then we recently raised $4 million from the Land and Water Conservation Fund that's been funded for the first time since 1992, since the Clinton administration. And so what we're doing right now, and this is a good shot of President Roosevelt and Gifford Pinchot taking on the Guggenheims and J.P. Morgan over the Copper River Delta. And that Bering River coalfield is not only historic and controversial, but it's what jump-started the conservation movement in Alaska in 1907. And the only way it was stopped back then was a case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, where the Guggenheim and J.P. Morgan lost because they declared it a monopoly to allow them to destroy one resource to take another, and that was to take the Bering coalfield and power the locomotives, go 150 miles upriver to the Kennecott mine and take the richest vein of copper out, and then bring it back down to Cordova and put it on ships to America. And so this is the Bering River region. Go ahead and go through these slides, Brian. We got the Bering Lake on the delta. We got the Bering River coal seams that we have a close-up of that. And then this is the Bering Lake right here. Go ahead and go to the next one. And there's the seams you can see. A lot of those seams are vertical, so they would actually have to strip mine and do mountaintop removal to knock this mountain down in order to, and there's several mountains they would have to take in order to get all that coal to market. And the next one is Catella. And this is what 3 million acres of the lower Copper River watershed looks like. It's absolutely stunning. So the last few things I'd like to say is that what we really need to do is think about innovative solutions that are about building not only resiliency, but are ones that are restorative for the environment. And it's about building regenerative economies for the future, because a dear friend of mine, Michael Johnson, said, Dune, if it's not regenerative, just don't do it. And I think he's absolutely right. And we have to be that same way. We got to think differently and act differently. This is our time. We're the best we got, folks. So look around and realize that it's up to us. It's our time right now to figure out how we're going to make a difference. 5 minutes already. So this here shows our portable kelp seed nursery. We realize that there's about a dozen bottlenecks and barriers to entry in this kelp space. There's some of our kelp schools, but one of the things is that, like let's say if I decided to start a new fishery over there, then I would buy a boat, I buy a net, I buy a permit to fish that area, and then I would think like that fish and go catch it. Well, in kelp and mariculture, it's not like that. You have all these barriers to entry, everything from the landscape analysis to your site analysis to figure out where you're going to source your wild seed. You have to get it within 25 miles of where your kelp farm is. You have to figure out how you're going to dive for it, how you're going to cultivate it, how you're going to deploy it, how you're going to monitor it, how you're going to harvest it in the spring. These are 3 beautiful underwater shots of our kelp species, ribbon, bull, and sugar kelp that we're growing right now. But then you're going to have to figure out what kind of boats are you going to take, because see, kelping is different than fishing, where fishing starts in May and ends in October. Well, kelping starts in October and ends in May. So we're out in the coldest, darkest, stormiest parts of the winter, so you need safe boats and resilient boats, and also you need to be building boats for the future. And this is an image of my nephew Jimmy, and we're starting to figure out how we're going to do the processing, how we're going to do the marketing, how we're going to value add it. Or to get it into a shelf-stable state, are you going to dehydrate it? Are you going to freeze it? Are you going to ferment it? You're going to have to figure out how to get it to market. And so you can certainly blanch it, but I don't like that because it takes the oceany flavor and the salt away. And then you got to add salt to it later. Like, no, this ain't right. And it tastes funny. And so I would rather, do it the right way and just, freeze it or dehydrate it to keep all those properties there. So this kind of shows you some of the different pilot projects that we have going on. But it's really important that Indigenous peoples organize. So we start a Native Kelp Cooperative so we can figure out how to share those costs. Do a Native Kelp Alliance so we can figure out how to do the 501c4 work, the lobbying, the legislation, the policy changes. And everything there is everything from figuring out how we can leave the kelp in the water to get the most carbon sequestration possible, to be able to figure out how to do direct seeding, get away from lines and buoys and anchors. We want to figure out how to get CDQs for mariculture for the surface of the ocean for Indigenous peoples. We want to be able to figure out how we can do programmatic permitting, since what we're doing is based on restoration and science. And we should be able to get 10 permits at a time instead of just 1. And because of the time and the cost, there has to be a different way to do things. We also want to figure out a declaration of principles and a Indigenous kelp farmers' bill of rights, because right now there is no plan for kelp or mariculture in Alaska, let alone America or around the world. And as I mentioned on the film, this is a modern day land claims that is happening on the ocean. And so we need to have a plan. And so we feel that with a lot of the projects that we're doing, a lot of the pilot programs, the Kelp Now tour that we're getting ready to start, that Ryan and different Native Conservancy folks are leading, is we want to go to all the different communities and find out what their needs are and figure out what they want to do and how they're going to get in. Because like one of the things that we want to also start is an Indigenous Ocean Farmer Loan Fund, a grant fund, to help them get permits, to be able to help them get gear, to be able to help them get boats, and figure out how to get off the ground and in the water. But it's not going to happen if we don't organize and we don't figure out how to direct that energy, that time, money, or love, whatever direction that we need to in order to make these things happen. And I know I got to wrap up here in a second here. So this is just a slide that I wanted to throw up there on this new Aqua Act, and this is bad for the ocean. It's going to allow salmon farming, you know, in our waters. And so whatever, you know, you can learn about this act and stop it. This is not good for mariculture, it's not good for salmon. It's certainly not good for the ocean. And you know, the other thing I want to just mention politically is that Biden, in his first week in office, created an executive order for 30 by 30, which is by year 2030 wants to save 30% of the oceans and 30% of the lands. Well, that's not going to happen if he doesn't work with the tribes. He doesn't work with the people who live from the land and the sea. And here in Alaska, 35% of the lands have already been federally protected under NILC. And I can tell you right now, every single native corporation don't want to see one more single acre of land permanently protected from unsustainable development. And so that means that if they work with the tribes and land back and ocean back, that's how he's going to prevail on 30 by 30. And in closing here, everything I do is for the next generation. This is my daughter, Ananda. She just turned 12. She's a dog sledder. She's a horse jumper. She's a basketball player. She's a track and field and a downhill skier. She does it all. But I'm afraid that she's not going to have the choices and the opportunities that I had when I was growing up. So I feel like everything I do has to be about being regenerative, and it has to be about what we're actually going to leave the children of the future. And Ananda, she filed her first climate change lawsuit when she was 1. She filed her second one when she was 7. First case went to the United States Supreme Court. They refused to hear it. The second case went before the Alaska Supreme Court, who refused to hear it because they didn't want to give the children of the future a voice. And it's so sad because they're the ones who inherit our bad decision debt and are left with what we are leaving them, which I am really concerned about. So in closing, I'd like to say this. We have one blue planet. We're not going to get to Mars or the moon fast enough. And so we have to stand up and we have to be louder than everything else. We have to act like our life on this earth matters. We need to be having funerals for the planet, not Earth Day. I mean, this isn't about, feeling good and enjoying all the magnificence like the David Attenborough films, that show how wonderful the bounty and the beauty is of our planet. Well, his last film that he won a major award for was, he told us the truth about the state of the planet. So we all need to wake up. It took the nation's worst oil spill at the time to wake me up. And I hope that it doesn't take that for you, but I'm afraid that it will. I'm afraid that this is it. And as I said, we're the best we got, and I'm in this to win it. And I just want to know, are you? Because I'm in. Let's do this. Thank you.